Hi, I'd like to talk for a couple of minutes about our learning and teaching and assessment framework, and particularly about the fourth principle in that framework, which is around assessment and grading. And the guiding principle there is that we will carry out aligned and authentic assessment, and that our assessment will be aligned with learning outcomes, providing students with the opportunity to demonstrate achievement in real-world scenarios and professional contexts. So there are two parts to that principle. There's alignment and there's authenticity. So if I can talk about each one in turn, alignment is about making things clear to students. So it's about writing learning outcomes that are simple and explicit enough so that anyone who reads them, including all students, will be clear as to what they are going to learn and what they're required to do, if you like. And therefore your assessments should test those learning outcomes, and when students pass those assessments, then they can demonstrate that they have met the learning outcomes. Now ideally you'd want to assess particular learning outcomes in particular ways, in particular assessments. Sometimes an assessment can cover more than one learning outcome, but it's not such a good idea to try and have all learning outcomes assessed in a kind of matrix way against all assessment tasks. That doesn't make anything clear at all to students. So it's far better to rewrite your learning outcomes and your assessment tasks so that they align and that clarity is obvious to the reader and to our students in particular. The second part of this principle is authentic assessment. Now, sometimes when people hear that phrase, authentic assessment, they think it means valid. You know, is the assessment, is the number that we get from the assessment task, the percentage, valid and reliable? No, it's not about that. It's about authenticity in the way that the assessment is conducted. So is it a real world professional type activity? Is it a work related learning activity in a particular discipline? So rather than asking say nursing students to do some mathematical calculations that are devoid of any context, you'd give them an assessment which was around calculating the drug dosage for a particular patient. So it would then mean something. The scenario, the case study that you used would mean something to the students. So you're still testing mathematical knowledge, but only in the context of the way in which that knowledge would be applied to that particular student. And that is about making it real to the students. So it's not some meaningless bit of maths that they don't understand the context of, and it becomes something that they see quite clearly, the relationship between what they've learned and how they will apply that in their professional context when they've completed their degree. So those principles then of aligned and authentic assessment are about making it clear and making it real to our students. So just to recap then on this principle and give you something that you can actually use at a practical level. This is about assessments that make it clear and make it real to students. And the clarity is around talking about the relationship between learning outcomes and assessment to students. So talking to students about learning outcomes, talking to students about their assessment. And what you might think about in terms of reflecting on your practice is the extent to which your learning outcomes could be the criteria by which your assessments are measured. And maybe in an ideally aligned course, your learning outcomes could be the assessment criteria. So how close are your assessment criteria to your learning outcomes? And that gives you the opportunity to think about whether you'd want to rewrite any or all of those. And secondly, in terms of authenticity, it's about real world, it's about context, it's about profession. And therefore you might think about the extent to which your assessment tasks are founded on real world activities, whether they are carried out in a real world way or in a somewhat more artificial way. Are you using case studies? Are you using problem problem solving or whatever it might be. And again, that gives you the opportunity to reflect on what you're currently doing, to think about whether you might be able to do it in a more authentic way in the future.